What would you do if someone destroyed your life, stole your child, ruined your name, and left you rotting in prison for a crime you didn't commit?
Would you wait quietly for justice, or would you sharpen your rage into a blade and make them bleed for every single year they stole from you?
Park Chan-wook's 2005 film, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, isn't about forgiveness. It's about obsession, brutality, and how vengeance festers until it explodes.
Get ready to find out how 13 years of betrayal, abuse, and stolen motherhood transform a woman from a doe-eyed angel into a merciless force of reckoning. This isn't just revenge, it's payback turned biblical. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth.
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation of $5 or more via our website at axiom.app, Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. The executive producer of this video is your boy Brian, who requested this film through Axiom Amnesia's Deep Dive on Demand program that we'll tell you more about later.
There will be spoilers if you haven't seen this, and I don't think you really want it spoiled.
I know, right? So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. But if you think you want to kind of find out what it's about, we got you covered. So let's first talk about the background. This is a Korean film, so it has subtitles. It's close to 2 hours long, so you're going to be reading the whole time. One thing about the films with subtitles is I always find it hard, like I'm reading and it's hard to see, watch the screen and read.
Yeah.
At the same time.
A lot of work.
Yeah. But also you should know that this film is also referred to as Lady Vengeance. So sometimes it's Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, and sometimes it's just Lady Vengeance by itself, depending on maybe on the language it's translated into and whatnot. So, but a little background on the film is that it's this psychological thriller that's directed by Park Chan-wook. And the film is the third and final installment in Park's Vengeance trilogy. And it comes after, because it came out in 2005. So it comes after Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance from 2002 and Old Boy from 2003. And it stars Lee Young-ae as Lee Hyun-ja, a woman released from prison after serving the sentence for a murder she didn't commit. And so the film tells the story of her revenge against the real murderer. And so just so you know up front, it is violent, kind of in the way if you think of Kill Bill and those kinds of movies.
And it's not exactly a trilogy. I think they just labeled it that after the fact because this director just happened to make these films that are kind of similar.
With this theme of vengeance.
But since you mentioned Kill Bill, they say, is inspired by, I think it's an old Japanese film, Lady Snowblood. And you'll understand that later on. But that film also is said to inspire this film that we're talking about, Lady Vengeance.
Yes. And so the cast, as we mentioned before, Lee Young-ae is Lee Hyun-ja, and Choi Min-sik is Mr. Baek, and Kwon Ye-young plays Jenny. And so basically, these are three main characters. There's a ton of other characters that are in the film, but I don't want to confuse you with just naming all of these different characters. So we'll just kind of talk about them in the role rather than their name. Yeah. But these are the ones we'll refer to.
And I can't pronounce them because I don't speak the language. So even if I hear it, I don't know.
Yes. And so I apologize in advance if I'm like butchering any of the names. We've done our best. But it's difficult not being a native Korean speaker, right? And so, or a Korean speaker at all. So let's start with a short summary of the film, and we'll go through that rather quickly, just so that we can, talk about the themes and stuff. Because to me, that's really where the meat is. Although there are lots of details to go on, we're just going to give you kind of the basic overview of what happens in the film. So it starts out with this Christian musical procession that's gathered outside of a prison, and they're holding this block of tofu, which is symbolic of purity, and they're waiting for Hume Ja's release, right? And so she was once branded a child murderer. She's confessed to kidnapping and killing this 5-year-old Wan Mo. And this was 13 years before. So she's done 13 and a half years in prison. So her youth and her angelic face and beauty, and a ready confession made her this national sensation. They were even talking about doing a movie about her. But during the 13 and a half year sentence, she became this model of reform and was admired for her apparent spirituality and kindness. And she earned early release. Yet the moment she took steps outside, it becomes clear that this angelic Hume Ja was only a mask, and what she truly seeks is vengeance.
Yeah, so then she starts to gather, I guess, or come along the folks who she was incarcerated with, because she has been having this plan for so many years, right, that she's put into place in prison. So now she comes out and she meets those people who she were in prison with, and she need help like food, shelter, and weapons. And it's part of a plan that, you know, she's been working on for a long time. So then she takes a job at a bakery, and she has an affair with this guy, Gwen Sheik, who is the same age as Wan Mo.
The little 5-year-old boy, yeah.
Yeah, would have been if he had lived. But, you know, beneath her little calm demeanor, there's this truth that Hume Ja never killed Wan Mo at all.
Right, which is just wild, because in the beginning we think that she is the killer, right? Because she's confessed and she seems like the killer. And then, you know, as the film unravels, then we get to find that she is actually is not the killer.
Yeah, and I didn't read the synopsis and stuff like that. So once I started watching the film, that was just it.
So as a high schooler, she was pregnant and desperate. And so she turned to her teacher, Mr. Beck, for help. And instead, he exploited her. He was demanding sex. He pulled her into his twisted scheme. And so he used her to lure little Wan Mo. And then he murdered the boy, the little 5-year-old, himself. And so he is the real killer. And so when she resisted taking the blame, he kidnapped her own infant daughter and threatened to kill the baby unless she confessed. And so the detective on the case knew that she was innocent, yet fabricated the crime scenes to details to cement her confession. And so there was a point where she just was walking through how she committed these crimes, and he's sort of prompting her at various points so that they can fake this confession. Powerless, she went on to prison, and Beck walked free, and he continued to destroy lives.
Yes. Want us to cover your favorite movie ASAP? A one-time contribution of just $50 or more to Axiom Amnesia gets you a deep dive on demand, a 30-minute discussion on any film you choose.
It's easy. Step 1, send $50 via our website, axiom.app, where you can pay via card, Apple Pay, or you can pay directly via Cash App at $Axiom Amnesia. See the links below. Step 2, tell us your movie, email, the name you want to appear on screen, and what kind of deep dive you want. General, a specific character, a particular aspect of the film, etc. Step 3, watch your deep dive on demand with your name listed as executive producer.
Lock in your deep dive on demand today and hurry. Spots are limited.
This offer is not valid for filmmakers or distributors. Subject to availability and terms apply.
So once she got out, she started, of course, she's going to look for her daughter, right? Mm-hmm. And she learned that her daughter was adopted by some Australians, and they named her Jenny, right? Mm-hmm. But Jenny is basically 13 years old. She's a teenager, somewhere around 13, right? Maybe 12, 13, depends on your math. But she doesn't speak Korean at all. So she's kind of standoffish with her mother a little bit, right? But I think it's more that Hume Ja is a little more distant with her daughter than the other way around, because the daughter is interested in, you know, I guess more about her history, like anyone would be who is adopted, right? And then especially if you're of different culture, different race, ethnicity, those sorts of things. So she's just basically, she's like, hey, I want to go to South Korea. I want to go to Seoul, right? So Hume Ja goes to Seoul, and the mother and daughter start to bond. But Mr. Beck, he remade himself into a preschool teacher. He was always a teacher, right? Yeah,
but he was teaching older kids.
Oh, okay.
You know.
So Mr. Beck, you know, became some preschool teacher. So he's hiding in plain sight amongst the children. Then one of the women who he who Him Ja was locked up with, I believe, basically befriended, I guess I could say, Mr. Beck, right? So then they used that to plan the capture of Mr. Beck. But Mr. Beck, I guess he got wind or something, and he hired some gang to try to, I guess, take Jenny and kidnap Him Ja. But Him Ja she kills them and she kidnaps Mr. Beck.
Right. So then we see that basically he's bound to this chair in an abandoned schoolhouse. How appropriate, right? He's a teacher that's doing all this stuff. And so Beck is unmasked. So on his phone strap, Him Ja spots this orange marble that once belonged to Wan Mo. That's the little 5-year-old boy. And this is like a trophy, and alongside it hangs trinkets from other children that he has murdered. So after shooting him in both feet, she discovers tapes of his true crimes. And so they were not ransom schemes, right? Because, okay, so there's a point where they talk about good kidnappings and bad kidnappings, right? The good kidnappings would be like if you were just helping with a scheme and you kidnap the kid and then you get the money and then you return the kid and the kid is fine. And, everybody's happy in the end, right? The kidnapper gets the money, the people get their kids back and, whatever. But the bad, obviously, would be if something goes wrong, you don't get the money, or if the kid is killed or whatever in the process. But so that's, kind of what he has been doing. So for years, Beck had preyed on the children in the schools, and he was killing them because they annoyed him. And then he would fake these ransom calls and collect money and then just move on. So when he would fake the ransom calls, the kids were already dead by that point. And, he was just using these tapes that he recorded of the killing to, get the family to send him money. But the intention, he was a serial killer. So the intention was never to actually give the kid back. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So what happened was that Him Ja confessed, got locked up for 13 years for this one boy's, the 5-year-old's death, right? But then that allowed Mr. Beck to continue to do what he was doing, right? So there were more kids even after that. And so she basically gets all of the grieving parents, which is about 5 families, together, and they confront Mr. Beck in this old schoolhouse, and she has them watch those tapes of what he did to their children. And then they basically decide or vote to off him instead of turning him in to the police.
Because she does give him the option. She's like, look, we can go to the police or, you can handle it.
So then one by one, they go into this other room and they do the stuff that they want to this guy, right? And then they end up offing him. And then, after they all do it, they take a group photo so that, it's cemented that if anybody has a change of heart, then, there's this picture of us all together out here.
Yeah, you implicate yourself if you try to say, that what happened.
Then the group got all together and they buried Mr. Beck's body. Yeah.
And so then after that, they go back to the bakery where she was working and stuff like that. And they all together, it's the weirdest thing because they're singing happy birthday, but they have like a very somber celebration meal where not meal, but they cut up a birthday cake and they eat a cake, right? And so after this sort of, I guess, a catharsis for all that has happened to this point, Him Ja, she sees Wan Mo's ghost in there after everybody leaves. And the ghost is first a little boy that's smoking a cigarette, which is like the oddest thing. But they do a lot of smoking in this movie. Because in 2005, I guess, and I don't know, I haven't watched a whole lot of Korean films lately, but if go to the comments, do they still smoke in the Korean films? Because I feel like even in 2005, in the films coming out of the US, they weren't doing a lot of smoking on film. But anyway, so this little boy ghost is smoking, and at first it looks like a little boy smoking and it seems odd and you don't know what the deal is. But then as the camera pans and then, you see that the boy turns into like a grown man, the age that he would be, if he had lived. I guess what would that make him 18 or so, something like that. So he's grown by then and he's smoking a cigarette. So, this
probably
is supposed to be
age, right? When she got locked up.
Yeah. And so, then, he's smoking a cigarette. So, it's supposed to be the same boy. That this is something supernatural. And she starts to try to talk to him. And then this, I don't know what you call it, device is put over her mouth like a ball, like a gag, and it's the same gag that they had over Mr. Beck's mouth when they were, doing what they did to him in the final hours of his life.
Yeah.
And so then after that happens, her vengeance is complete. Basically, she, she goes and she sees Jenny, and they have this final scene where they're out like on the street and it's snowing, and she has the tofu and she's like, hey, I want you to be pure, because this tofu represents purity. And so I want you to be clean and pure like that, because at one point, basically, it does talk about the idea of becoming pure through kind of getting cleansed of all of your sins and stuff. And so the little
and
girl...
it represents, when you get out of prison and you eat that tofu cake, then it represents basically you're starting over a fresh, new, clean slate. Yeah.
And so, so she turns to Jenny and she's telling her, to live purely like like this tofu, be to like what it represents. And so then Jenny tastes it, and then she offers her some, and she won't eat any of the tofu. And in this moment, it's like she seems very much conflicted. Like, am I pure? Can I, are my sins wiped clean? Because she's just gone on this vengeance rampage, right? Literally culminating in that evening and finishing that evening. And so then she starts to, cry and whatever. And then she just like literally slams her face into the tofu and begins to eat the tofu. And so then at the end, it's kind of hopeful, like maybe she is redeemed, maybe, so there's a lot to discuss, but that's how the film ends. And so let's talk about first impressions. Had you ever seen the film?
No,
neither of us have ever.
I haven't seen any of them, even though I've heard of Old Boy a lot. And then Spike Lee done a remake. He directed a remake in about 2013. I haven't seen any of them.
I hadn't heard of any of it. This was all new to me. So, Brian hooked us up with something we had never seen before. So what did you think of the film? Did you think it was good?
Yeah, I think it was good, but I'm not really necessarily one for this, as I've grown, for this violence stuff. It's just... And
I feel like in a way it's sort of a style. You pointed out kind of like the Quentin Tarantino sort of just gratuitous, over the top, sort of violence that you see. And but what
I don't think, no, there's a difference, right?
Okay.
The way that is shown, right? I don't think it's gratuitous violence, but just the themes that's here of the violence it's about. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't think they show anything necessarily that's all that out there in this film.
Well, and what I think could be realistic, and we'll talk more about it later, is the idea of the rage, right? Because this whole thing is about vengeance. Like, you're angry and you want to get your lick back. You want to get back at whoever you feel, did you wrong. And obviously in this case, she was definitely done wrong. She spent, more than a decade in prison, and would have spent longer if she hadn't gotten out on good behavior, behind something that was a whole setup from the beginning, and someone who preyed on her because, she was just a pregnant teen, like that was really her only quote unquote sin. That was the only thing that was, and so she turned to someone for help who then exploited her and then got her wrapped up into this whole thing that winds up leading her to prison.
Yeah.
And so, I think it was a good film. I like movies that make me contemplate kind of life philosophy, these scenarios that make so I did think it was a good film. For me, the hard thing about it was just kind of grappling with figuring out what was going on between reading the subtitles. So I think if I was a native Korean speaker, or even a Korean speaker at all, that it would have been even more enjoyable, because if you're watching it, I think maybe it requires to kind of go back and watch a little bit,
you miss things. I'm looking at the bottom of the screen, got to look up. You can't do both.
Yeah, yeah, and it makes me have some empathy for people, like, because if you imagine for years before they were doing the dubs, and it would be great. I don't know, the copy we had was completely subtitled. I don't know if they have a dubbed version, but we certainly did not have access to a dubbed version. But if they did, that would make it so much easier, if it was dubbed, because then you don't have to be reading. But it made me have this empathy for how U.S. films go all around the world. And for years, people were reading them. I remember when I had to read the subtitles. So when I was living in Mexico, and this was in the 2000s, and I don't know, what do you call, not the noughts, the teens, and the late noughts, I went to the movie theater and the movies were in English, but they had subtitles. So I was like, oh, how convenient for me, because I speak English and I don't have to read the subtitles. And it dawned on me that, what the experience is and how it takes away from the experience to the viewer when you don't speak the language, but yet, you want to be able to experience films from all sorts of different cultures. And that just kind of goes along with it. So let's just kind of get into some discussion. So one of the things in this film is that everybody who knew Hyun-ja in prison, because she had, like, it kind of remind you of Orange is the New Black a little bit, the way how, you have all of these women in prison characters, and
that's probably where they got it from.
Maybe. And so they all say that she has changed after her release. And while she was in, though, recall that she was in and she was just like a perfect angel, but she was doing stuff.
It was a ruse so that she would basically get shorter time and stuff, right? So she played as a Christian and basically used this pastor too, right?
Right.
So she had a relationship with this pastor, and then but everybody still saw her as, I guess, angelic, or an angel, as they actually say.
Right.
Too. So, but, I think it was that the way that it's expressed was different, because once she got out, she was kind of on this mission. But I think that she didn't change at all. That might be a hot take, but I don't know.
You think she didn't change?
No, she didn't change, because she, she had the little puppy and she had to work herself up to try to kill the puppy. When she had Mr. Beck, she really couldn't do it on her own, right? And she manipulated these victims to come and do what she ultimately wanted to do. And then she didn't shoot the guy, Mr. Beck, until he was already in the ground. You know what I'm saying? So she was too pure, too innocent to do it on her own, which is ironic with the ending of, a clean slate and wanting to feel pure when you ain't all the way there, right?
Yeah.
But you got other innocent people to get involved.
Wrapped up, you know.
But, there is, quote, some blood on your hands, right?
Definitely.
But her who she is as a person, which is kind of the message, hasn't changed because of what was done to her, right? And you have this need for vengeance.
And I think that if you're looking at that need, like the need for vengeance, the need to get back, and it's funny because, this is not the Christian principle, right? That she has been saying, hey, I'm a Christian here, and I'm following along, and, forgiveness of sins, all of these things. That's like a thing that I wondered. And so this brings me to the question, do you think Hyun-ja was redeemed in the end? Like, we see her be willing to partake in the purity ritual, if you will.
What do you mean redeemed?
Like redeemed in the sense that, do you think that she, like, that her slate was clean? Like, let's just say theoretically, she needed to let go of everything. Like, was she going to walk this path, or was she going to continue to be the same person moving forward? Like, was she made anew by this? Like, was that good enough? That's
this sort of contrast between the Christianity and when she said, I converted to Buddhism, right? And talk about, and then she had the book, The Way of Dhamma, right? And this is sort of being reborn anew, right? Versus just letting go of the past too, which would be the Buddhist principles that she kind of also put to the wayside so that they have this sense of vengeance, right? Or this actual vengeance enacted. So I don't know, but that's the thing. You don't have to have purity, right? That's this thing that everyone strives for, right? That's it. We're striving to be perfect people. And I think they may have mentioned perfect a couple times, right? Saying no one is perfect and all that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
But
that's what Mr. Beck says when one of the parents asks him why you did this. You know, well, nobody's perfect. What? And then that obviously wasn't a good enough answer because she went ham on him after that.
Thing, you see what they did to him, though, right? So you're basically him, which is why him Ja is gagged in the same way at the end, right? And it kind of trying to put it that it's Wong Mo, basically that offense that has it that way. But you had your hand in all this, right? So when you see the tofu cake at the end, or even at the beginning, at the once they get out of prison, right? That's supposed to represent, you know, the innocence and all that. But all of the families after this act, what do? They ate chocolate cake, the complete opposite, basically, right? With red candles in them, right? And then you got these red candles, right? With red candles in them represent the blood, and the blood that she wanted to keep continuing to flow, right? And they don't get any of that. Right. So-called purity or cleansing. They brought to the other side, I guess, to the side of Mr. Beck.
And, you know, at one point, the narration says something kind of to the effect of like she wanted vengeance, but she couldn't find redemption in like her in the stuff she had done in the past. And I think one of the lessons is the question is, did she feel better after she got what she had obsessed over for years with getting her vengeance? Did she feel better? Was that good enough? And, you know, one of the parents brings up the question of, you know, because when they're trying to decide if they're going to participate and do this or not, one of the parents says, hey, you know, is this going to bring our son back? And obviously the answer is no. And that just makes it complicates it, because really what you want is, you know, and we talked about this with ideas of justice. What is justice when you've been done so wrong and what you've lost is something you cannot get back, right?
Right. So,
you know,
she was innocent in the beginning, I guess, in a sense, and less innocent in the end, right? Even though I say she's not changed, because now you went through all these things. If you had just not done any of this, then you won't have this new greater thing on your heart for the rest of your life.
Because she hurt people in the process, right?
So at the beginning, she's like, I'm not eating this tofu cake. But then at the end, she does it because she maybe hopes that would give her,
she's desperate to be clean again, right? To have the slate wiped clean. And, you know, go to the comments. I mean, what do you think about that idea? Like, do you think her slate can be wiped clean? And I also like how they brought in different, you know, religious beliefs, worldview, spirituality, however you want to put it, from different, because they're not always, you know, agreeing with what it takes to kind of ascend, right? You know, and what you can do to be quote unquote forgiven or redeemed, or, you know, these other things. So I really like that aspect of it too, because in a lot of films that would come out of the United States, you don't really have this juxtaposition of religion. You just, and if there is a difference in religion, you might have, you know, Muslims, or you might have Christians or Jewish people. And ultimately, those are all kind of these three monotheistic religions that are all based on much of the same stories and you know, and events and things that happened. And, you know, they're just focused on different points on the timeline, right? And so they are inextricably connected, those three religions. But when you talk about Buddhism and other belief systems, then or spiritual practices, then it infuses a different way and perspective and way to look at and digest these things that have happened. So Hyun Ja's daughter, Jenny, she talks about wanting vengeance against her mother because of being abandoned as a child. And it's almost like when you hear how ruthless and raw the daughter is, about what she wants. But she does say, I want this because any mother that would do this to a child, right, deserves basically the worst. But she says, but I can't do that to you because blah, blah, blah. But then I'm like,
And you can't just say sorry either. Mm-hmm. And I think she was counting and she said sorry like 4 times.
Yeah. Yeah. She had a number of times you had to be able to say that you should say sorry, so. But the mother and daughter were very much alike, because that they both were this way. And I do wonder if the daughter, because, we see the daughter seem to accept and love the mother in the end. But I wonder if some of that, because we saw how the mother had manipulated and pretended, right? Is this what the daughter is doing? Is the daughter still going to get her vengeance in spite of her mother's final message to her in the film being like, be pure, do not try to do bad things, Yeah. So that's a question that's out there that I think is worth contemplating as well.
I don't know about that one.
What do you think then? Do you think she's like, I felt this, yeah.
I don't think it rose to the level of that, right? So, Ja lost 13 years, right, of her life, I guess. And then in a sense, Jenny lost her entire life up until that point.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Her mother,
Yeah. Well, her life as it would have been, as it's, quote, supposed to be, as a Korean girl. Is what was lost.
Because the other thing is, too, she was adopted by Australian parents who were white. So then she lost her entire culture.
Yeah.
Right?
Her identity.
Her identity. And they did a wonderful job of like raising her as parents. Like they were good parents. She was well taken care of, had all kind of advantages and whatever. But she lost the trade-off for that was losing her culture.
So was that Mr. Identity. Beck that was translating between the two?
Either that or the pastor.
Was the pastor there?
I don't know.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so, I got a little confused at some points. I thought it was Mr.
Beck that was translating. So there's this scene like when she's captured Mr. Beck where they're talking to each other.
Okay,
and they have this language barrier, right? Because to read those letters, Ja had to, try to look through, I don't know if it's Korean English or English Korean dictionary to try to translate what the daughter was writing. But they spoke to each other, I think, through Mr. Beck. But y'all can correct us on that one.
So the next thing is and I want to talk more about, because this to me was kind of like funny, ironic, sad, wild. It just gave me all these different emotions. The point when the families see the videos of their children, being murdered by this serial killer, and they're trying to decide what to do. And, the question, one of the things that comes up is, well, is it a personal matter or not? Because they're trying to decide, like, do we all just go in there and as a crew whoop their butt, or should it whoop his butt, or should it be individual? And somebody says, well, this is a personal matter.
Yeah. And at one point, somebody, they tell their spouse, they're like, wait, we're not the last ones to go in there. So you can't just go in there and basically off them because everybody has a
We got to get there. We got to save some. You got to save some for them. So like, it's crazy. And so then obviously they decide that they're going to go in there as, like each family can have one representative or more to go in and do this. So then they get dressed up in these like raincoats or whatever and all this stuff so that they don't, so that they literally don't get blood on them. But there is one who is the final person to go in, who is the grandmother of one of these children. And she's the only one representing her family, because I think she said that, the parents maybe got divorced and then the mother moved out of the country or something like that. And so she's the only one there representing the family. She's the only one who wears her regular clothes. She doesn't put anything on herself, or anything like that. The rest of them are all like sitting there in their out of plastic ponchos, and gloves, and, so that they don't get blood on them. But it's almost like she's reconciled the fact that she knows what she's going to do. She's going to go do it. And I thought that was an interesting choice that she doesn't have this poncho on or whatever.
Yeah. But so the idea is, makes you think of the actual death penalty, right? It's like, so is it just a personal matter? Because they try to make it as if it's individual to the victims and be like, oh, we're doing this for the victims. But everybody in society, like, they need to have this done to them, right? So then, at least here, in the United States, what happens is when it's time for it to be done, then a family can go in and observe this happening as if it's, some auxiliary unit that's acting on the behalf of the family or something, when people decades and even centuries ago has decided that this is the way things would be done, right? But then, some families, they take it as a personal matter and involve themselves up to that level.
Well, and when they're at the beginning talking about, well, what should be done, the first question that one parent has is, does he have children? Because I think, I almost feel like they were like, we gon' literally, if they got a kid, the kid got to go. Or if he's got, I don't know. Why would you, what do you think it was then?
I think it was this. That's one thing to consider when we're gonna do something to him. Like,
that's another way to,
because going to suffer.
I interpreted it as like,
all right,
the child should die.
Ja, she did it for her kid, right? Then when they were having this whole discussion, then they were like, so why was he doing this and then getting this ransom, right? And it's like, he wasn't doing it for a kid or anything like that, right? He wasn't doing it for his kids. And then I think it's Ja who's like, he did it for a yacht, to buy a yacht, right? And then it's just like, all right, you weren't even doing it for
a quote unquote good reason.
Yeah, a good reason, which is, I'm not Korean, but that's probably a big deal, seemed like, at least what I could get from this film, in that culture. Right? Even like when you were talking about how, kidnapping or whatever could be done the right way when it's, or holding people for ransom, when you just let them go. You know what I'm saying? And we also have the class thing too.
Right. Because one of the families was like, look, we scrimped and scraped everything we had for the ransom money that he absconded with. And now to know that the child was already dead when you paid the ransom, you know.
And how they were dressed differently from everyone, right? Even like the grandmother was more posh than everyone else, who didn't care about, covering up her clothes, right? Everybody had on this fancy black clothes. You had the poorer family dressed in regular folks' clothes, and it affected all of them because he was basically, how a lot of people do when you look at class, you're like, oh, those families, those people, they're rich, they're well off, right? And that's what Mr. Beck was doing, right? He was trying to target the kids of,
rich
wealthy
people.
Parents.
But because you had this poor family who had scrimped and scraped to get their, child who had less money up in there,
Right. And I think that's sort of the message too, where, okay, we do tend to generalize people based on certain circumstances, and we don't even know. And is that casualty worth it?
So, they had to actually drink before they could go in and do it. Like, they had to muster up their, even with the anger and all that had happened with their child, the families couldn't just, they go in and do it. Like, they had to take a shot, and then when the first lady goes in to do it, her husband doesn't go with her. He can't do it. He's just like, no. So she goes in to do it. And the detective is, because she's got a knife, the detective is giving her pointers. He's like, hold it like this all the time. So, because you could cut yourself if you don't, and and it just was like weird to me. Even when you're just going in here to do this, there's a way it must be done.
Mansplain.
Yes. So, bottom line, they each take a chunk out of him until the grandmother at the end is the one who offs him and stuff like that. And back to the idea of Hyun-ja, she didn't have the guts. She had the guts to do a lot of manipulating, but she didn't want to get the actual blood on her hands. And that leads me to the question of, even if you want vengeance, even if you want something to be done because you just want to feel better about what happened to you, could you do it with your own hands? Could you do it with your own hands? Right. And on a smaller scale and not about vengeance.
That's the whole thing about like the death penalty. Too,
yeah.
Right? With those people who go and sit in and watch, right? A lot of them probably wouldn't do it with their own hands. But just like people won't even, slay a chicken. You know what I'm saying? For them to eat.
That's what I was just thinking about. I was like, this is questions that, because you and I talked about that with, we would like to have a small homestead. And I was like, all right, so when it comes to, butchering and, preparing meat products, like, am I going to be able to, when I asked you straight out, I was like, are you going to be able to handle that?
Yeah. But so with Him Ja, right, she can't do it to anybody else. So that was, bringing all the families together, right? Hey, this is how you get your vengeance, right? That you do the thing. When she went to, Won Mo's family, what did she do? I'm going to offer my fingers to you and do it to herself, right? Which is something totally different than them getting to enact whatever they wanted.
Yeah, and there are just so many things it poses when you look at the idea of vengeance. And then this is the final question that I had that it made me think of is, would you take vengeance if you thought nobody would know, right? Because these families, nobody else is going to find out. So the punishment factor, because a lot of times people don't do things because the punishment deters them, right? Not about vengeance specifically, but just crimes and stuff, or, the risk of the punishment, right? The risk of the result is why some people might not do it. Now, this isn't true for everybody, but that might be a reason. So if that's removed, they're likely not going to be found out. They've covered their tracks. They've got an inside man with this detective. So, they're going to be able to take their vengeance with nobody knowing. Or do you go through, like they pointed out, endless trials and stuff like that with this guy trying to turn him in and do things the quote right way?
But Him Ja had the opportunity and couldn't do it, right? So, but when you had the peer pressure amongst the families, then they could all go through with it, right? So when you got the pressure of this group, and Him Ja didn't have that pressure. She didn't have someone trying to convince her of anything, right? She didn't have a video of what was going on, that something was happening to a daughter, except the situation where the gangsters basically come along, and then it becomes self-defense basically, or defense of others, or defense of her daughter. Then there's no thought about it, right? There's no rumination, nothing. It's just done,
right? Because if we look at the different people who she killed, so she killed in prison. She killed one woman who was basically like a bully, but she did that as a, I think, form of manipulation so that she could get the favor of the person that one of the targets of the bully, right?
And it's very different than looking somebody in the eye and doing whatever.
Because she poisoned her, you know? So like to poison somebody is not the same as, like you said, looking him in the eye and taking him out.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the self-defense where they're trying to kidnap her and they're trying to get her, so she gets them. And then, in the end, the role that she had with Mr. Beck. But I feel like, what about this bigger thing that it causes you to think about, which is the weight of what she put on those families? Like you said, they ate the dark colored cake in the end, right? They don't get to eat the purity cake.
Right.
They are eating the chocolate cake, the dark cake, and they are left with basically with that on their spirit, if you will, right? With knowing that they participated in somebody's murder.
Yeah.
And that's heavy. And no matter what, even if it was for a quote unquote good reason, even if it was for vengeance, even if your belief system says you had the right to do it because of whatever, That's heavy. And she put that on them because she wanted something that she didn't have the guts to do.
Well, so that thing with the families, they found out about it, right? So she had this whole plan, they said, was laid out the entire time that she was locked up. But then she gets out, gets new information, and then those families are brought in too. So would she have done it?
I don't know.
Because so the thing that's significant about the marble is that she was asked, right, when she basically confessed, oh, his favorite toy, you know, his favorite marble. What color was it? She got it wrong. But then when she has Mr. Beck, she sees the marble and then something clicked right there, right, with that marble. And then she notices basically the other trinkets from the trophies from the other kids.
Right.
So then, you know, she has to bring, but would she have done it?
And what about the weight of knowing of her decision to try to save her own daughter, meaning that these other families, 4 or 5 other families, had to give up their child? You know, because when you're faced with the idea of, you know, what is the value of a life? Is her daughter's life more important than these other children's life? Well, to her, obviously it is. And to those families, their child is worth more. But like from an objectively true perspective, the price paid was much higher. But she didn't know. That was the other thing. She didn't know that he was just a straight up serial killer. She didn't know that.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting thing to contemplate, is sometimes the things you don't know, and because you don't, you know, you make a different decision for a great reason, to save your own daughter.
Yeah. Remember Elie Mystal, I think is how you pronounce his name? He has his book Bad Law. So, you know, one of his things is kind of about the felony murder crimes or laws in the United States. And that's kind of what's part of it, right? Actually locking up people who didn't, you know, and, you know, some people use law as a proxy for or emblematic of the morality, right? So locking someone up for a murder that they did not commit, or, you know, versus or thinking about whether or not this act that you do could end up with somebody being killed.
Right,
too.
right.
And how much are you implicated in an actual murder, depending on what role you even played or didn't play in somebody dying. Right? So it's just like, that's why she does have this guilt with her. Yeah. And I don't know that it'll ever completely go away, because, you know, in the end, that's to me the clear reason, one of the underlying reasons anyway, why she doesn't feel worthy to eat that cake, right? You know, if you've gone, like, let's just say with the idea of coming out of prison and you eat this tofu cake, you've served your time, like you've paid the price and now you can start over. But in her situation, she's just piled on a whole new list of sins, if you will, right? And she didn't feel worthy at that point, you know, and because she hasn't paid for what she did, although it's falling under this idea of retribution and vengeance. What's the significance of them making her out to be angelic and everyone seeing that? That's the question.
I'm contemplating it. I'm thinking about it, because what is the significance of, well, I thought that it meant, part of it means that she's a great actress. The other part is that we really haven't talked much about here is that she was very beautiful, right? So it's pretty privilege also, you know, and we talk about in our reviews and stuff how pretty privilege or any other kind of privilege, you know, gives you some advantages, and people will assign attributes to you that are undeserved solely based on your looks, right? And in the reverse is true. If you are, you know, somebody who is not conventionally beautiful, in fact, would be considered maybe ugly, then people assign or have attributes that are ugly, like we talk about fat shaming and stuff like that, then people will assign other attributes to you that are not positive, right? If you're fat, then it must mean you're lazy, you're sloppy, you're this, you know. If you're beautiful, you're wonderful, you're almost angelic, because people think of angels as being beautiful, you know, especially when you think about them talking about Lucifer, you know, who ultimately, you know, became Satan, and he was the most beautiful.
Yeah, but so you're talking about someone who's beautiful being seen as angel, but also angels being seen as beautiful, right? So which one is it? It could be that because they just feel that aura, that you know, that innocence and that purity, right? Which is much about. So that they actually do see her that way because she is that way, right? Because you know, you're going in, you're basically a kid. That dude who worked with her was basically just an innocent boy.
And by the way, she slept with him. He was so young, and she like straight up slept with him.
Yeah. So I think that
she was doing questionable things to be really pure.
That showed that how innocent she was, because that's what you have to believe, that she is that innocent. She is like an angel. She even goes off and, you know, protects these people in prison too.
Yeah.
Right? With her little stature and all this, right? And she used that too, I believe, right? Which the things that we look at that makes us think that people are pure, innocent, like, you know, giving sermons, being into, you know, Christianity and stuff, that you'd see that's not what made her innocent or pure or good. That's the thing she used. You know what I'm saying? For some other sake, something that we would probably consider not good, that you could consider not good, even though a lot of people might think that this whole vengeance thing is good. But yeah, that's what she used to do some dirt.
Yeah.
But it shows that, I know that.
But isn't that what everybody does? Isn't that what everybody who is manipulating does? Is that they use that to make people trust them. Yeah. And this is how they get what they want.
But I'm saying she's ultimately innocent. Right?
I would say she was at some point. But the level of manipulation she does in here is diabolical. You know.
Okay, but for someone who has been wronged, how diabolical is it that I'm trying to get out of this this terrible situation that you put me in? I can't judge that person negatively.
Well, okay, but see, here's I think it's, to me, the thing that makes it diabolical is the using of other people and not caring about what that consequence is for them.
Okay, yeah.
That's the piece of it. See, it's not that she wants to get back at. It's that what she's with. You see, if she was like, I'm going to just wait my time or whatever, or even just pretend to be good. I'm going to pretend to be good so I can get out early. And then you go and then you just enact revenge on this guy and you kill him. Yeah. Then I feel like I'd judge her a lot less harshly. It would be a lot less of a question in my mind. But you roped in all the women that you used, the pastor, you roped everybody in and put something on them, right? When she kills the woman was the bully for the other girl, when, you know, and you're making them, you believe something that isn't true because you aren't representing yourself accurately. So now they're believing something that isn't true. That's another thing that you're putting on them. That is a consequence for them that you don't care about.
She is an angel who gives the gift of vengeance, right? All those people wanted that. Just like the families happen to be her angels in the end for what she wanted enacted.
And maybe she was their angel. I don't know. You know, like we could go in circles on it because it's just, you know.
That's what makes it good.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is why I say it was a good film. It was just, I say you gotta want it, right? Because you gotta be, you know, care about what's going on in the film to really get everything from it and to watch the details and pay attention to all of the stuff in addition to reading the subtitles.
But what about just generally the idea of whiteness? Because, you know, they're like, make yourself white. You know, you got the tofu and all this that represents purity, the snow and all of this. And then Jenny, who goes off to Australia, this now place of whiteness, right? And basically, quote, becoming white,
Yep.
And then, but she rejects that. And then
she's like, I want to go there. And actually, we didn't talk about this, but Jenny, to get to go, Hyun Ja is like, no, you can't go. And she's like, and she holds the child. Jenny holds a knife to her own throat to basically make them let her go to Seoul.
Yeah.
And you said she's just as crazy as her mama.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, so I think there's this, I don't know enough about the Korean culture to even get into that,
And please, if you do, let us know in the comments, because I'm interested to know kind of how it connects there, because that's a whole big cultural piece that we are missing.
But also, you have the perspective of the individuals, right? So everyone in the culture won't have the same view of that, too. So I don't know what the filmmakers, the director, and the writer individually would be trying to say about that.
Yeah.
So,
but it gives us all the opportunity to decide what we're going to do.
Yeah.
When faced with a crazy situation, it was entertaining.
Definitely.
So I want to thank again the executive producer that made this video happen, a movie we probably never would have even known. We didn't know about it to watch it. Your boy, Brian. Thank you so much. And we appreciate your support of the channel.
If you made it this far, type Lost Marbles in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around to the end.
And be sure to check out one of the videos that's on the screen right now. And go to axiom.app, where you can find all of our recent videos in one place. That's from all of our channels, because this isn't just the only one. And you'll find links to them back on YouTube so you can watch them here.